Ian, I think you can match Justin. I didn't start shaving till Deb and I had been married 10 years, I don't think. So you guys that shave in high school, you're amazing to me. In high school, I could grow it on my head and not on my chin. Now I can grow it on my chin and not on my head. So, that's just a wrong combination. Should have been the other way around, but oh well. Going to start a new series today called Life's Pressures. Life's Pressures. I want to talk about coping with others to start with. Coping with others and coping with life. You ever get to the place where you just think, my plate's full? My plate is full. Most of us, we really didn't realize that we could get any busier in life, but we do. We do. I'm amazed whenever I talk to people who are retired, and they say, I don't know how I ever had time to work. I'm busier than I've ever been in my life. Well, I'm very busy. I'm blessed. I really like my work. Most of you know that. I enjoy my work. I get up early. I'm in here early. I just enjoy it. I just look forward to every day. I'm involved in the church. I'm involved in the community. I feel like I'm a doctor. I'm in hospitals so much. People's lives. I put in more time than I've ever put into my life. And that's the honest truth. I really do. And I thought I was busy when I was young. And then that's pretty good for a guy that only works on Sundays. So for all of you who think it's only a Sunday job, it's a great job. I love it. But my plate's no fuller than most of you. It's no different than how you're feeling about your work. But because we are so very busy and that we're living in a world that I believe is busier than it's ever been before, we must equip ourselves to deal with life and with people. Life and with people. Our tolerance and our stress levels, I think they're being challenged today more than ever. More than ever. We're living in a stressed out world. So, for us Christians, here's the issue. As a Christian, I really want to do my best for the Lord. I want to represent Christ well. I want to be able to put my best foot forward. I work at it. I'm really miserable whenever I feel like I've stumbled or I've embarrassed myself. So how do I manage a busy schedule and still cope with issues? Because folks, being a Christian isn't easy. You have to work at it. So how do we do that? How do we make this happen? Well, I want to talk about coping with some issues. 2 Corinthians chapter 4, if you'd like to turn to that, starting in verse 16. Therefore we do not lose heart, though outwardly we are wasting away. Yet inwardly we are being renewed day by day. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is not seen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is not seen is eternal. I like what Paul had to say here, that light and momentary troubles. Many of the issues that we are required to deal with, I don't know about you, but they don't seem light nor momentary for me. It seems to me like they're very heavy and they go on and on and on and on and on. They seem to be forever. And life is tough and life is demanding, and we know that. So because of that, they don't seem light and momentary. So for today then, I've divided this light and momentary problems into two categories. The first issue that I think we must learn to cope with is everyday life. Everyday life. Life can be aggravating, frustrating, and irritating. Does anyone else feel that way? All right, so at least I know I'm not just preaching to Mike today. The issues of life, they affect us, and they affect how we deal with others. Sometimes the simplest task can turn into a nightmare. You ever had one of those? Where it just seems to be such a simple task, I'm going to get this done, and lo and behold, it turns into a flood. At least that's the way it works at my house. It seems that I'll be working on something, and the next thing I know, I've broken 3 other things that I've got to fix. It just happens. It's life. So sometimes that simplest task can turn into a nightmare. Or those hours and hours of preparation. You ever find that you've just really prepared? You've been working on something. Just so excited about it. and then it goes unused. You can't use it. All of a sudden, it's just not going to be, it's not going to be pertinent, it's not going to pertain to what you're doing, or something. Then there's those dreams that are unfulfilled. Now, most of us have dreams that we look back on that we had whenever we were in high school, college, whatever it might be, and we look and think, you know, I never did get that done. I never did get that accomplished. Sometimes those are aggravating and frustrating and irritating. And sometimes we just think, I've wasted an opportunity. You ever had an opportunity you think you wasted? I have. There's just times that I've looked at something and I've looked back on it and thought, man, I missed that. I wasted that opportunity. We get aggravated over our situation, over the situation that we find ourselves in. It's just aggravating. Most of us deal with some type of aggravation. Folks, that's life. That's part of life. Or we'll get frustrated. We get frustrated over those things that might have been. That's what might have been. You know, if I'd practiced more, I might have been a better ball player. If I'd taken a horn instrument, I might have been able to play the horn. If I'd gone to class, I might have been smarter. There's all sorts of those I might have been that we find very frustrating. And now they frustrate us as adults. And we look back and think, Deb, why didn't you make me go to class? Well, she thought I was going to class. So let me clarify that. So, yeah, those are very frustrating. Then I like the ones that are irritating. Once we get irritated, we get this attitude. Whether you want to admit or not, we go, why bother? Why bother with even trying? We just get irritated at the situation. Why am I going to bother? Well, folks, let me reiterate, it's just life. Just life. Daily troubles associated with life. That's just what it is. Now, the second thing that I think that we have to learn to deal with is that we have to learn to cope with people. Now, I think that's the toughest of dealing with life. Now, not all people are a problem. Just 9 out of 10. So, not all people are a problem. Only some of them are. You ever hear this expression? We live in a dog-eat-dog world. Anyone ever hear that? Well, I'm pretty sure whoever said that was smart. Many of our pressures, our stress level, our troubles, are people created. Are people created. Pressures, stresses, troubles are people created. Our world is filled with people who are selfish, arrogant, experts on everything and everyone. People who are divisive, self-seeking, unkind, impatient, and unloving. Thank you. That's our world. Not long ago, I'm going to tell this story. I shouldn't, but I'm going to tell this story. I sat at the barbershop. Now, barbershop used to be a pretty peaceful place. I know I don't need to go very often, but I still like to get it off my ears. All right, so I sat at the barbershop. The place is packed. It's absolutely packed. And it seemed to me like I'm in the chair, and there's this man that's sitting there, and every other word out of his mouth is very nasty. I don't know if that aggravates anyone else. Remember that aggravating part? I sat there and listened for a little while, and then I said, sir, if you open your mouth again, you and I are going to have troubles. Now I've got everyone's attention in the barber shop. No one knows exactly who I'm talking to. They have an idea. And the barber, I'm worried about my ears. I'm afraid he's going to cut one of them. He goes, sir, he's a preacher. I go, don't give me that preacher stuff. Now they've got my attention. I said, did that lovely lady bring you in here? And he goes, yes, she did. I said, she don't need to hear that word again while I'm here. Well, she's heard it before. She's not going to hear it again today in this office. So everyone is paying attention to me. Well, by the time it was all said and done, everyone was glad to see me leave the place, I'm sure. But I guarantee you, the word hadn't been mentioned again. See, folks, we live in a world that has fallen. And those pressures and those stresses, even for Christians, get to the place where they just aggravate us as a Christian. And I'm sitting there, now I didn't say anything I shouldn't. I didn't threaten to throw him out because it's since I've had my heart attack. If it had been a year earlier, I might have helped him to the door. But the way it was, I didn't. I just Told him we were done with his conversation. Please do not open your mouth while I'm in this chair. It's frustrating. We all get there because people are divisive, self-seeking, unkind, impatient, and unloving. Most of us have to deal with them every week, someplace, somewhere. Now remember what Paul said in the Corinthian letter? That light and momentary stuff? I'm pretty sure I've seen this guy come to the door of the barber shop and see me sitting there and he just goes on. I guess he hasn't learned to talk correctly. I don't know, but he sure doesn't want to come in and start in again. Verse 16 said, do not lose heart. Do not lose heart. Renew inwardly. So now with all these things that I've just mentioned about coping with life and coping with people, what do we do? What's our answer? See, as a Christian, I don't have to tell you the problems, you know them. Those that I've just mentioned, you deal with every day. Someplace or another in your life, work, when you stop along the way, whatever it might be, you're dealing with these issues. You're dealing with unkind situations. You're dealing with people that are rude. You're dealing with people that can't talk without cursing. It's become a way of life. I don't know about you, but I find it an offensive way of life. Now, as a Christian, I have to learn how to deal with that so that I am still representing Christ well. And I represented Christ well that day in the barber shop, by the way. I didn't say anything that was inappropriate or unkind. I just stated a fact. Sometimes we just have to learn how to deal with it. So how do we deal with these situations? What is our answers? Colossians chapter 3, starting in verse 12. I want to give you some tools for coping. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience. Bear with each other and forgive whatever grievance you may have against one another. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all of these virtues put on love, which binds them all together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body you were called to peace, and be thankful. And be thankful. Our coping tools. Folks, we are living in a world that we are the seasoning of. We are the salt of the earth. We're going to season this world. We're not going to change it, but we're going to make changes in it. The first thing that I want you to remember today is that we live in a fallen world. So what does a fallen world mean? Whenever you hear a preacher say, well, it's a fallen world, what does that mean? Folks, it means that we have fallen into the traps of Satan and sin. We're living in a time whenever I believe Satan is running more rampant than ever. I think we're seeing a time that is more difficult than we can remember. Just look at your TV program tonight if you can. I don't know if anyone else, we've got to where if it's not a ball game or oldies music, we hardly watch anything on TV anymore. Just because I'm tired of them pushing stuff down my throat. So I'm boycotting it. I just want you to understand that I'm boycotting it. I don't think anyone's noticed yet because the programs are still on there. We do watch reruns of MASH. You know how long MASH has been off the air? And they're still doing that same meatball surgery, and by now I've got it down. I could be a MASH surgeon. I've seen so many of them. So, we live in a fallen world. A world that has fallen away from Christ and is living more for the devil. And it's a problem. So by living in this fallen world, we as Christians, we need to be able to season it just a little bit. So now to season it, that means that I have to have these tools that we're talking about. I have to have compassion. There's times that I see situations that are so frustrating, but then I look at it. I'm sure Action Ministry gets this over and over again. You look at situations and you're thinking, that is just so frustrating, but But then I have to have compassion, and I pour out my compassion upon whether it's children or elderly or whatever it might be who are in need. There's times just a little kindness will go miles and miles and miles in making a difference. There's so many times that right here on this corner, we get the opportunity to express just a little kindness. This week they've been working on our gas lines, as you know. And I walked out to speak to the men that were working on the house behind us. And whenever I did, I knew one of them looked very familiar. And we talked for a few minutes, and then it started coming. I think, I know this guy, and he thought he knew me, but he said, you know, you don't look like you did 8 years ago. Well, 8 years ago, I buried his wife. And when we were going to Perkins Restaurant, she was the waitress who was killed in the car accident, the head on. And I'm standing there talking to, and his name, boom, popped into my head, Hank. And Hank and I stood there and talked for a while. And he said, you know, I visited here and I'll be coming back to visit again. Just a little kindness. Just walked out, said, hey guys, the doors are open if you need the restroom. You need a bottle of water, we got one. Coffee's on, whatever it might be. Just a little kindness. You know, kindness will go a long ways in the world around us. And sometimes because we are so frustrated with the world, we forget to offer that olive branch or that kindness and reach out in however we might need to reach out. Sometimes just a little humility. Sometimes we just have to humble ourselves. You ever have to just humble yourself and listen? Sometimes you humble yourself and listen to the preacher's stories when you don't want to. But sometimes, I see you nodding your heads, sometimes you just have to humble yourself and do that. Sometimes we do that. Sometimes just a little gentleness or a little patience. See, the jobs that we do, they're made easier when we have the right tools. Now, I grew up, we had a big garden. The one thing I know about a garden, use a hoe, not a dozer. All right? You'll have a lot better produce. What about mowing grass? Use a mower. Don't use your pocket knife. It's going to take you a long time. You're going to have to start over. Tools are to make our life easier. Have you ever thought about this passage in Colossians that God is giving you tools to make your life easier in tolerating what's going on? They are designed for certain situations in our life. Now, these tools that God has given us are not always easy to use. There's times that it would just be easier to say, I'm done with this situation. It'd be times it'd just be easier to get aggravated or frustrated or irritated. There's times that it'd just be easier to say, out! But instead, as Christians, we try to deal with the situation. And these tools are designed for that. They're not always easy tools to use. They're not easy tools to use. Sometimes it's really hard when someone's been so very unkind to you to return it. Not unkindness, but kindness. Sometimes that's very hard. Sometimes whenever you've listened to someone go on and on and on and you know they're crazier than a bed bug, it's hard to be humble and say, you're crazier than a bed bug. Sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we just have to do it. But because we are Christians, we really work hard at using these tools. In the case of compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, it's not always easy. But you'll never leave that situation thinking, I didn't represent the Lord well, if you use these tools. You'll never leave that situation thinking, oh, I wished I'd handled that differently. You know, after the years of serving Christ, most of you will find that they come just a little bit easier to use. Often it's our first consideration. That doesn't mean that we always stay with our first consideration. Sometimes we'll decide we're going to be patient and then we've had enough and we're not. I'm working on that, folks. I understand that. But the one thing that we have to realize is that we live in a fallen world. And if you think that mean and nasty people are going to go away, let me know where they're going to, because I'm going the other way. They're not going away. They're going to be all around us. So God has given us tools to work on that situation. God has given us tools so that we can learn to cope with the pressures of life. Tools are great. But folks, now here's the last point. Tools alone are not enough. Tools alone are not enough. You can have a tool. Let's call the Bible a tool. And we place it prominently on our communion table. And every Sunday morning we pass by and go, what a wonderful tool God has given us. That's a great tool. Oh, I'm so thankful for the tool that God has given us. Or we might say, well, look at this. He's divided that tool into two sections. There's an Old Testament and a New Testament. He's divided the tool into two sections. What a marvelous tool God has given us so that we can know about Him. And we walk on by. You know what that was worth? Absolutely nothing. It can lay on your kitchen table. It can lay on your dining room table. You can fill it full of obituaries. If you've never opened it, it's worthless. So God has given us the tools, but if we do not use the tools, now we got a problem. So we have to learn to use them. Let's turn over to Hebrews. In Hebrews chapter 12, he's going to say this. Starting in verse 1. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, now that's pretty scary. There's witnesses all around us. Now, do I want to be one of the witnesses or do I want to be one of the problems? Since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sins that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before Him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider Him who endured such opposition from sinful man, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. So that you will not grow weary and lose heart. The very first thing, we need to start looking like Jesus. Looking like Jesus. Oh, I'm not saying you need to grow long hair and a beard like the picture that we have. I'm saying you need to look like Him in your approach and your attitude. That we need to fix our eyes upon Him and not in the issues that are all around us. He said, do not grow weary and do not lose heart, but to look like Him. Sometimes in this world, we can easily grow weary. We can easily grow weary. We can get tired of dealing with it. We can get tired of dealing with everyday issues. We can get tired of dealing with people. We can just get tired of it. I bet more of you than would want to admit have prayed to the Lord sometime or another, Lord, I'm tired of it all. I'm tired of it all. Tired of messing with these people. Tired of it. He said, don't grow weary in what you're doing for Him. Then He said, don't lose heart. In other words, stay the course. Don't give up. 2 Corinthians, you'll have to write this one on the bottom. 2 Corinthians 3:18, it says, we who with unveiled faces reflect the Lord's glory. I want to look like Him. I want to reflect Him. That I am being transformed, that verse says, transformed into His likeness. Every day of my life is a battle. But when the day is over, I want to look more like Christ than I did when it started. Whenever I am able to say my evening prayers, I want to be able to go to Him with a clear conscience that I have given it my best. That I am being transformed more like Him every day. That's a work in progress. And that's what Christians are. Is we are a work in progress. There's days that I don't look more like Him. There's days that I wasn't transformed, that I regressed. And those days make my heart heavy. But it's those days that I am able to look back and say, you know, God, I am so thankful. Even though that person aggravated me to death, I didn't punch him in the mouth. Thank you, Lord. Thank you, Lord. Lord, even though that person is so irritating and agitating, I didn't recommend that they go to Latonia Baptist. How about you? We've got to learn to cope in this world. Now here's the good news. This is what I'm going to have you take home with you. This is the good news. This world is not my home. I'm just a passing through. My home is a wonderful place, someplace beyond the blue. And whenever I get there, those frustrations, irritations, aggravations, they're gone. Well done, good and faithful servant who has been transformed into the likeness of Jesus. Will you all please stand as we have our invitation?